أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome to our sixth class. We're going to start chapter 3 today, inshallah. Chapter 3 is about documentation, and this is a special and unique chapter that does not have any introduction before this, and there is very little follow-up after this. So this chapter must be studied in a different way, and I'm going to give you instructions on how to do that, inshallah. If you follow the instructions, inshallah, you will do well. This is a chapter where students have some anxiety because this is something that is unique. So if you follow, inshallah, my instructions, things will be easier for you. Documentation is something that identifies what exactly happened, who was involved, when it happened, where it happened, how it happened, why it happened. For example, if you go to the supermarket and you buy some items, you'll be given a receipt. And you take that receipt and you go home. Later, if you want to return that item, you have to bring that receipt, and that receipt is the documentation that proves that you purchased the item from that supermarket. So since you have the receipt, it identifies you with the customer, and the salesperson's name or ID number would be on that receipt. So the supermarket would know who was the salesperson. The receipt would show what was purchased. It would show when it was purchased. It would show which location you purchased it from. So it would not show why you purchased it, but it would show how you purchased it. Either you paid cash or you used your debit card, etc. So documentation identifies all of these aspects of any transaction, and there are different ways of documenting what has happened, and the four types that we have listed on this slide includes: number one, narratives. Narratives are written descriptions. If you're asked to write something about what had happened, how it happened, we can all write it using a language we know, English or Arabic or any other language we know. So this is something that we are not going to focus on because you already know how to do that. The second one is data flow diagram, which is the first of the two documentation techniques we're going to study. Data flow diagram shows the flow of data from the beginning until end, and we're going to study this in detail today, inshallah. The third type of documentation is flowcharts, which includes three different types: document flowcharts, system flowcharts, and program flowcharts, and they represent different aspects of a business transaction and business process. And we're going to just get a brief introduction to this today, and we're going to study this in more detail on Sunday, inshallah. The fourth one listed here is other written material, which includes anything that you cannot identify as a narrative, which is written description, a data flow diagram, or a flow chart. This goes into other material, other written material. So we're not going to go into any detail about this type of other written material. Okay, so let's try to understand why we study the documentation. If you're an accountant or a business executive, you are going to need to read and prepare some sort of documentation throughout your career. So it's necessary for you to understand some documentation techniques. It also is useful in identifying strengths and weaknesses of internal controls. And internal controls we're going to study at some time later, inshallah, what they mean and the details of it. The documentations identify strengths and weaknesses of internal controls in a business. Number three, And the use of documentation reduces complexity. So if there is a complicated situation and you don't know what has happened, who did something, why it was done, if you have documentation, it shows the details of why or how or when or who, and it makes things easier for you to solve. And number four, it is used to train new team members. So if you have a new team member, a new employee, documentation techniques are easier uh, to, 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 to use and train the new team members. Okay, the two types that we discussed that we are going to study, number one is the data flow diagram, and number two are the flow charts. And you see 2, 3, 4, they are all flow charts, three different types of flow charts: document flow chart, system flow chart, and program flow chart. We're going to go into the details of these in our next class, inshallah. We're going to start by focusing on the data flow diagrams. So let's start. This is a data flow diagram. It shows the details of the flow of data, and it has four symbols. As you can see, you have the box, you have the arrow, you have the circle, and you have this parallel bar. These are four symbols. Now, in any language, you have alphabets: A, B, C, D, Alif, Ba, Ta, and these alphabets are used to form words and sentences. Similarly, this is a way of communication, this is a way of documentation, and we have symbols here. So before we can start drawing diagrams with the symbols, we need to know what the symbols mean. The first one is a box right here, which represents a source or a destination or both, meaning data is coming from this source or data is flowing to this source. And whether it's a source or whether it's a destination, it depends on the arrow that is either coming out of it or going into it. So this customer, what do you think? Is this a source or is this a destination of data? It's a source, right? Very good. It's a source. This is a source. How about the bank? Is this a source or a destination? The bank is a destination, right? It's a destination. So now, if there was an arrow coming out of this bank and is going to the government, the bank could also be a source. So this could be a source and a destination. So the box could be one or both, right? It could be a source, it could be a destination, it could be both. The second symbol we have here is an arrow, which is the flow of data. So this arrow represents the customer payment data. This arrow represents the deposit data. This is the remittance data. So the arrow represents the flow of data. The circle represents a transformation process. So the data comes in, the data is processed, somehow the data changes, either it's something is added or something is subtracted or it's debited or it's credited. Something happens to the data and it comes out from the other end as a transformed or a processed or changed data. And the transformation process, because of the process, it must have at least one arrow coming in and at least one arrow going out, because the data is coming in, it's processed, it's transformed, it's changed, and then the changed data or the processed data is coming out. So must have at least one arrow coming in, one arrow going out. The fourth symbol is this parallel bar, which represents data storage, right? So here, this is the accounts receivable T account, the accounts receivable file, and this symbol could be slightly different in the book, or even if you're drawing it using using Microsoft Word symbols, this could be slightly different. um, you should stick to the symbols that we have in our slides. We will use them so that we are not confused, and when you go to work, inshallah, your company might use slightly different symbols, uh, and you will learn them when you work, inshallah. Okay, so what is the story here? The customer is sending the payment data, and then the payment is processed. So the payment is received from the customer and it's processed, and then the payment is deposited into the bank, and the data about the deposit slip is completed and it's deposited into the bank. The bank is notified of the deposit, and this payment that is processed is sent to the accounts receivable for update. So when it comes here, the cash account is debited and the accounts receivable account is credited. So the payment is received and the accounts receivable is updated. The accounts receivable account is stored here. So the accounts receivable is updated. And this update information, the data about this update, is sent to the credit manager. So the credit manager is notified that the customer has paid and the accounts receivable is now updated. There is no longer an accounts receivable from the customer because the customer has paid. Does it make sense? Is it clear? Do you understand the story here? Okay, very good. Now let's learn a little bit more. The four symbols that we have in the data flow diagram includes, number one, this source or destination, or both, by this box. This transformation process, which has an arrow coming in and an arrow going out, right? Data transformation. This arrow represents data flows, and this symbol right here represents the storage of data. The data flow diagram has three levels: context, level 0, and level 1. We're going to study two of them in detail, the context and the level 0, and you can look up a level 1 uh, diagram either in your book if you have the book. If not, you can look it up on the internet as well, level 1 data flow diagram. Now, the books may be coming in late this semester because of the situation we have, but you should know that any information you want to learn, anything, any topic you want to learn, there are loads of uh, articles and blogs and videos or things like that that you can access for free and you can learn. So if I were to tell you uh, to go and learn multiple intelligence, right? If I were to tell you go and learn multiple intelligence, and that's all I told you, and I asked you to go and learn, and I'm going to quiz you on it next week. There is ample information if you can find on the web, and you can master it in one day. In a couple of hours, you could know enough to take a basic quiz on multiple intelligence. So any data, I'm telling you this information because some students could be thinking, I don't have the book, this is such a difficult situation, what am I going to do, etc., etc. Now, know that when you go to work, when you're going to go to work, there are two outcomes for any assignment that is given to you. And my boss used to say that there are only two outcomes for any assignment. And he used to tell me that if I give you an assignment, you could come back and you could say it's done, or you could come back and you could present a list. You can come back with a list, a list of reasons why you couldn't do it. And my boss used to say that I don't want that list. He used to say that I want the thing done. So if you're an employee, you're an accountant, you're an executive, whom the assignment is given, and you find a way to complete the assignment, you find a way to do the assignment, and then you come back and you say it is done, you are way more valuable than the person who always comes up with an excuse and always crying and saying I couldn't do it, it's not my fault, it's somebody else's fault, I am always getting the bad deal, I am always in a sorry situation. If you fall into that, your whole life is going to be like that. You either need to find a way or make one to get it done. Okay, the reason I'm telling you this is because this is what makes you a strong executive, a strong individual, a strong professional who knows how to get it done. No matter how, he finds a way, no matter what, he finds a way or she finds a way of doing it. So you need to be that person if you're going to succeed, instead of coming back and complaining. So you need to get into that mindset. So we are going to study now, coming back to our text, and I'm going to do this from time to time with you, because I need to prepare you for the professional setting, so that you come out here not only with technical knowledge, but you come out with some soft skills, some skills to manage your career as well. Okay, now we have two levels here that we're going to study. The first one is context diagram, and the second one is level 0. And level 1, you need to go and look at one. And I'm not going to test you about this in detail, but you should learn about it and know what it is. Okay? And these first two is going to give you enough idea about the data flow diagram. So let's start. In here we have a context diagram. You see on the left these two boxes that are labeled departments and human resources. Now tell me what they mean, what these two boxes mean. What do they represent? Sources. Very good. What about these boxes on the right? They are destinations, right? Destinations. Very good. What about this circle right here? Transformation process, right? Transformation process. What about these arrows and these arrows? What are they? Flow of what? Data flow, right? Data flow. Very good. Flow of data. Now, what is the story here? Remember, we studied this in the human resources and payroll cycle, where the departments the employees work for send time cards that show how many hours they worked or how many shifts they worked, etc., etc. This is sent so that the payroll, the payment can be calculated, right? So these come from the departments the employee works for, either the accounting, marketing, finance, whichever department the employee works for, it sends the time cards to the payroll processing system. Human resources send the information on new employees in the new employee form. So if a new employee joined the company, the data about that new employee, the position, the salary, the date of hire, the details of that comes from the human resources. And if there is a change in an existing employee situation, then the employee change form also comes from the human resources. For example, an employee could be promoted to a higher position. An employee could get a salary raise, a salary increase. So this information would come from the human resources department, and it's sent to the payroll processing system to calculate the payment the employee is going to receive in that pay period. So the time cards show how many hours, and these changes or new information or new data comes from the human resources. Then the payroll process, the payroll department calculates the employee's payment, and either it's given to the employee directly or it's deposited into the bank account electronically. Either way, the data goes to the employee and the data goes to the bank about the payment. If there is tax payment and tax data involved, then that is sent to the government, and the payroll reports go to the management. So after the processing of the payroll, these four different types of data sets are sent to these four different destinations. Is this clear? Are you following? Okay, excellent. Now this is the context diagram. The next level is the level 0, which has a little bit more detail about this process. And you see the destinations and the sources are the same. You have the human resources here, which is a source. You have the departments here, which is cut off in this slide, but the departments where the time cards come, the box is supposed to be here. It's cut off because of the space in the slide. And then we have the destinations, the employee, the bank, the government, and the management. They remain the same. What we have added is the breakdown of the transformation process. So instead of one transformation process, now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we have 5 steps in the transformation process that is providing us with further detail on how the data is transformed. And we're going to study that in this slide, inshallah. So what happens? What is the first step? The first step is the new employee form or the employee change form. With any change in the existing employees, either salary increase or promotion, or for a new employee, the new employee's name, address, phone number, and salary and position, all of these things are added to the employee payroll file. So all the employees have a payroll file which contains the employees' data. Now, these are called master files, payroll master files, where the employee data is kept. Now, can someone remind us what we mean by a master file? When we say a master file, what type of data is contained in a master file? A file that has permanent data that do not change regularly. For example, date of birth that does not change, ever change, name. You can have the employee's position, which do not change regularly, right? But it changes if the employee is promoted, right? Student ID, for example, it is a permanent date. Your student ID will remain your student ID, and it will not be given to anybody, even 50 years from now. If you want to get a transcript from Qatar University, right, you can get with your student ID. Your student ID is going to remain your student ID for life. Nobody will get that, inshallah. So this is permanent data. Now, this data, if there is a change in the employee's salary or employee's position, this is first updated before the employee is paid. So this is step number 1. And you see the arrow both ways. So the file is taken out, it is updated, and the file is stored back. So this data is updated. Now you have the updated data in the file. Second step is taking the time cards, which show how many hours the employee worked during that pay period, and then taking any change in the data. Maybe the data changed, maybe the data remained the same. The updated file is taken and the payment is calculated. Once the payment is calculated, the file is again stored back in the payroll file, and the check either goes to the employee or it goes to the bank directly, right? So the payment either goes to the employee or it goes to the bank directly. And the payroll disbursement data, the payment data, the payment that was actually made, the salary expense was incurred, this data is sent to the general ledger for updating. And it will stay there. It will be updated at the end when all the data about this process comes. So this payroll disbursement data, disbursement means payment. This disbursement to the employee is made, and that data is sent to the general ledger, which is the last step. The update of that is the last step. Step number 3 is taking the updated payment data and employee data and preparing any payroll report that management needs. For example, if the management may ask for an overtime report, or the management may ask for a direct labor report. All of these reports are prepared based on the updated data after the payment is made, after the employee files have been updated, and they go to the management. The fourth step is if there is taxes, if the company has to pay taxes for the employees, then this is the next step, and it is calculated based on how much payment was made, and then this tax payment along with the tax forms are sent to the government agencies, and this payment information is sent to the general ledger for updating. So any tax expense, any tax payable, all of these things are sent to the general ledger for update. So then the general ledger, where you have the T accounts and all the details, the debits and the credits for every transaction, is updated with the payments of taxes as well as the salaries. So we are going to look at, inshallah, a general ledger. We're going to prepare one. It's starting from next week. You're going to start working on a computer program that you're going to use in recording transactions and preparing these reports, inshallah. So you will have a more hands-on experience, a concrete experience on what these reports look like and what they mean. Okay. All right. So this is what we have on the level 0 data flow diagram. Any questions on this? Is this clear? Okay. Now we move on to the next documentation technique, which is flowcharts. Now I'm going to just introduce you to the symbols today, and what you should do is between now and next Sunday, you should draw these symbols multiple times so that you're familiar with these symbols and you're not confused about what they mean. So remember, in kindergarten you used to write A, B, 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 like that, and you learn the alphabets. Why do they do that? So that you don't have any confusion when at or cat or dad is written. You know that this is B, this is A, this is D. You already know what they mean, right? Similarly, you need to study these symbols and you need to draw them a few times so that you have no confusion, because there is going to be a drawing exercise in the exam, and I'm going to give you some practice, and if you do as I ask you to do, if you follow my instructions, this will be very easy for you, and this is absolutely necessary for you to learn. And I'm going to share with you an email from a student who was in my class, I think back in 2011 or 12. Let me show it to you. Can you see it? Can you see? Are you able to see this email? Okay, so what does it say? It says, Dear Dr. Shahryar, I hope this email finds you well. I was one of your former students in Qatar University AIS course. I'm reaching out to you to show my appreciation for your efforts, which helped me to excel in my career. So this email I got 2017. Last week I had a meeting with senior process project engineers trying to explain to me a new software that they want to implement on site. I still remember when you emphasized on the flowchart chapter and you made it mandatory outcome of the course. Because of that, I was able to understand the provided diagram, which helped me to identify an unnecessary process, which saved the company 6 digits US dollars, right? Which is at least $100,000, which is at least QR 365,000, right? That's a lot of money, isn't it? Would you say that's a lot of money? So this is real. This exercise that you're going to do, that you're going to learn, is something that is going to help you in your career, inshallah. Are you following? Are you with me? So put in some efforts in learning this so that you are going to be the next success story, inshallah. Okay, very good. Now, my dear students, what we have here is 4 sets of flowchart symbols, right? Input, output symbols, processing symbols, storage symbols, and flow and miscellaneous symbols. You should draw these symbols multiple times, and you should know how to draw them before you come to class on Sunday. Draw them 5, 10, 15 times, however many times you know that this symbol means this. So let me introduce you to them. This first symbol right here, it represents a document, like a receipt or an invoice or a passport size photo. The document is represented with this symbol. This symbol represents multiple copies of the same documents. So the same document. So for example, let's say you're asked to submit 3 copies of your passport size photo. Then this symbol, if you write here passport photo and then 1, 2, 3, it would represent that 3 copies of passport size photos should be submitted. Okay, this symbol right here could represent input, it could represent output, it could represent a journal, it could represent a ledger, depending on where this symbol is. For example, if I write get, you will pronounce G as ga. But if I write George, you're going to pronounce G as ga. I'm sorry, ja. So ga, get, ja, George. It's the same symbol, but it reads differently because it's in a different word. So similarly, this symbol could mean one of these 4 things: input, output, journal or ledger, depending on where it's in the flowchart. And when we start drawing flowcharts, it will make more sense to you. Now, you can stop me and you can ask me if something is not clear. Okay, I'm going to continue, inshallah. I'm not going to ask you every time, do you understand? Do you understand? Okay. The next symbol here represents display. What you're looking at right now in front of you, the computer monitor, it could be your phone display, any display, right, is represented with this. This symbol right here represents a keyboard, right, a keying device. And if you put these two together, this display and this keyboard, and you connect them, this represents a computer or a terminal or a PC. It could represent your laptop. So this is a display and a keying device, both of them together. All right. This symbol represents transmission tape, which is manually prepared control totals. What does that mean? Uh, there are calculators that have printers and they look like this. You see this calculator right here. Are you able to see it? This calculator right here, it has a printer. You see it? Do you see it on your screen? Okay, you see this printer right here. If you're an accountant, you're going to use this regularly. You use the calculator to check the calculation either in a bank statement or in an invoice or in any report that is given to you. And after you check the calculation, you take this piece of paper and you tear it from this printer and you tape it to the document and you sign that you checked it and the calculation was correct. This piece of paper right here that comes out of this printer, this is called the transmission tape, which is represented with this symbol that is on this slide. So let's go back to the symbol right here. This symbol right here is the transmission tape. Is this clear? Do you understand? This piece of paper, right? This transmission tape is represented with this symbol. Are you following? It's the keyboard. Online keying is the keyboard. Is the keyboard which is connected to your computer. Okay? All right. So Ali says, Doctor, can we draw this diagram on star UML? What do you mean by that? Draw it when? In the exam, the diagrams you're going to draw by hand. And the practice that I'm asking you to do is to do by drawing them by hand. To learn the diagrams, just like the alphabets you learn, the best way to do this is to learn by hand. No, we are not going to use a software to draw or learn how to draw. We're going to do it by hand so that you can draw without any device, and then once you go to work or once you do a project, you can use the symbols in Microsoft Word. But we're not going to go to the software directly. We're going to do the drawing by hand, and that is the best way to learn initially. Okay. The net of symbol are processing symbols. This rectangle represents computer processing. So if the data is processed using a computer processor, a computer system, then this symbol is used. If it is done manually, so let's say you fill out a form and it's done using a computer, this would symbolize that. If you fill it by hand, if you use it, use your paper and pencil and draw it or complete the form by hand, then this symbol would represent manual operation, right? Doing it without the help of a computer. This symbol represents auxiliary operation, which means the device that is carrying out the operation is outside the computer. The word auxiliary means additional or outside. So when you go to the grocery store, this scanning device that scans your grocery items and they get added to your receipt, it's not the computer itself, it's something that is sticking out of the computer. It's connected to the computer, but itself it processes, it scans the barcode, and it adds the data to the computer. So this is called an auxiliary operation. This is additional operation outside the computer, and it could be attached to the computer. All right. This is an offline keying operation, which is a cash register that you have in your local grocery store. So when you go to the local shop or the local cafeteria, they don't have a sophisticated computerized scanning device. They take your candy or your juice and they add 2 reals, 50 dirham, 2.5, 3.5, 7. They weigh your banana and add it manually. there is no scanning, there is no computerized system. And then if they give you a receipt, most of the time they don't even give you a receipt. But if they do give you a receipt, it does not show all the details of what they sold you. It only shows the totals. It shows how much was paid for each item. So this is an unsophisticated, uh, not connected to any other device, and an offline operation, which is the cash register in the grocery store, the local grocery store or the cafeteria. You know what I'm talking about, right? All of us have been to these shops growing up in our neighborhoods. They still have them, right? It's not sophisticated, it's not computerized, it's not online, it's just disconnected from everything, and it's manually adding these items as you purchase them, right? So this is a offline keying operation like the cash register. So these are 4 processing symbols. There are 3 storage symbols. The first one is magnetic disk, the one we have in our computer, in our phone, in our jump drives. This represents that type of storage where the data is stored in a magnetic disk or a magnetic drive. This is the symbol that represents that. This is a symbol that represents magnetic tape. Now, uh, do you any of you remember audio cassettes? Do you know what an audio cassette is? Any one of you? Right? An audio cassette. Right? So this is an audio cassette. I'm afraid 5 years from now, I will have students who would have never seen an audio cassette. So this is an audio cassette. Now, you see there is a tape in here, right? So this tape uh, stores data. It stores audio file, and there are video cassettes as well. There was something called a VCR that was uh, like a very sophisticated device 35 years ago when I was growing up in Riyadh. When we bought a VCR, it was hot. Nobody in our neighborhood, very few people maybe in our neighborhood had one, and we had neighbors come to watch, movies and so forth in our VCR. So this was, I'm talking about 35 years ago, right? 35, 37 years ago, and this tape right here can store data. So it could store text, it could store audio, it could store video. This symbol that we have here represents the magnetic tape that is inside that cassette, right? This is still used in libraries and museums and so forth to store data that predates to the computer age, where the data was not stored in a disk. So now it's in the tape, and the microfilming device is used to look at this. So this symbol is still needed because we have data stored in magnetic tape, and the data is being converted, but there's so much data that all data has not been converted. So this is still used. Okay. And then this last one we have is the manual file, the actual physical folder that we have, the paper folder, the hard copy that we save. So this is the symbol that represents that file. Okay. So we have the disk, we have the tape, and we have the file. Clear? We have 2 more slides. This slide shows flows of data and documents. This solid arrow right here represents the flow of document or process. Now, don't confuse this with the data flow diagram. In the data flow diagram, the solid arrow represents flow of data. In the flow chart, the solid arrow represents document or processing of the flow of document or flow of processing. The dotted arrow in the flowchart represents data or information flow. So this dotted arrow, there is no dotted arrow in the data flow diagram. There is only one type of arrow in the data flow diagram, which is the solid arrow. So when you're given a question, read carefully. Is the question asking you about a data flow diagram, or is the question asking you about a flow chart, right? If it's a flow chart, then the data flow is represented with this dotted arrow. This last symbol on this slide represents a communication link, which is the transmission of information from one location to another location. So let's say you're sending from the restaurant to the accounting office, then this symbol would represent that it's going from one location to another location. All right. And this is the last set of symbols. This first one, on page connector, and this second one, off page connector. These two symbols you should draw and you should memorize and you should learn. And exactly what they mean, I'm going to explain to you on Sunday, inshallah, because you need to see these two symbols inside the flow chart for it to make sense. For now, you should draw the circle. It represents on-page connector in a flow chart, and you should draw this upside down house. So if you turn it around, if you uh, draw a house and you turn it upside down, this is what it would look like, right? Off-page connector. So these two, learn how to draw them and know what they are and exactly what they mean. I will share with you on Sunday, inshallah. This symbol right here represents a decision, this diamond. So if in the flow, if you have a decision where you have to say, okay, admit this student, do not admit the student, promote this employee, do not promote this employee. This is represented. And this one here on the right, it's a terminal. It could identify the beginning of a process. It could identify the end of a process. It could identify a department. It could identify an external party, depending on where it is in the flow chart. And again, more on this on Sunday. And the last symbol is this annotation. You do this dotted line and you make this bracket outside the flowchart and you put any explanation that you want to add in addition to the symbols. If you think that it's not enough for the readers to understand what you have drawn and you need to provide additional explanation, then this box will represent that. This box identifies that. Okay, it's like a footnote, if you will, in a document, equivalent to a footnote in the flowchart. Okay, so this is the end of the symbols of the flowcharts. You should draw them multiple times. On Sunday, when I start discussing flowcharts, you should have no problem identifying this is a document, this is a transmission tape, this is a decision. You should not get stuck and try to identify what does this symbol represent. The symbol should be clear to you. So draw them multiple times before you come to class on Sunday. If you do that, inshallah, your life will be very, very easy going forward. Otherwise, you will have difficult time. Okay? Inshallah. Any questions on any one of these? Is it clear? If you don't understand something while you're studying, you can feel free to email me, inshallah, and I will respond as soon as possible. Okay. Everything good? Okay. I'm going to stop recording, inshallah. This is the end of our lecture today.